Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Kovacs here. Mishnah Yomi is continuing in chapter 9 of Bava Metzia, Mishnayot 4 and 5. Mishnah Dalet, a makabel sode mechavero. Someone is working his friend's field, v'lo ratza lenokesh, but he doesn't want to do weeding. V'amar lo, and he tells the owner, ma echpot locha. What do you care if I'm doing weeding on a regular basis or not? Hawil vani noten cha chachura. I'm giving you a set amount. So what he is saying is, at the end of the season, I'm going to go through and plow up the field, and it's going to kill all the weeds. But throughout the season, I don't want to be there on my hands and knees pulling up the weeds. And even if the weeds growing in the field this year reduce the yield and there's less crops, well, lemaisa, at the end of the season, I'm giving you a fixed amount that we already agreed upon. So if there's a reduction in the crops, that's going to be my loss. I'll take the hit. So the Mishnah says, Ein shomin lo. The owner of the field has to accept this suggestion of the worker. Mipnei sheyachol lamar lo. He can actually tell him, lemachar, tomorrow, meaning next season, atu yotzim amenu. You're not going to be working here anymore. I'll be working this land myself, or maybe I'll have another sharecropper. Male lefonai asovim. But this field is going to be full of weeds. So the Gemara, they explain, if you don't do weeding and upkeep on a regular basis, then the weeds will grow up and drop seeds into the ground. So even if you plow up all the weeds at the end of the season, if you're not taking care of them and keeping things cleaned out, then those weeds drop seeds. You see this lemaisa with the dandelions when they're the little yellow flower. If you rip them up then, it's okay. But if you wait till they get to that poof ball thing, that's the seed form of the dandelion, then next year, Mazel Tov, you're going to have a whole lot of dandelions. Now, this Mishnah reminds me that in Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael is by default, the land belongs to the family. It's nachala, it's family-owned farms is the default situation. We actually discussed this last week in the Daf Yomi, in Bava Batra, Daf 122, and that about, there they talk about how in the future, everyone will get a Yerusha, not just of a field or a vineyard, but up in the hills and in the valleys and on the flatlands. They'll be given land of multiple types. It reminds me also the pasuk in Micah, chapter 4, verse 4, that in the future, everyone's going to be able to sit under his own vine, his own fig tree, and no one will take the land away, for Hashem has spoken. And that's about the Messianic age. So we see there's still family ownership of the land in the Messianic age. And, if the family owns the land and it's going to be passed down to the children, to the grandchildren, then of course they take a longer view of stewardship of the land. They try to make it more environmentally friendly. And it's a world of difference between the Jewish view of taking care of family land. It's so incredibly different than what we have in America, very, a corporate ownership, and the corporation doesn't really care what's going to happen to the land 10 years from now. And in some places, God forbid, oppressive government seize family farms and distribute them to their political supporters. It never ends well. The Jewish view is a family should be on the land, take the long-term view, and take care of the land, and as the land takes care of them. Anyway, on to Mishnah. Hey, the worker agrees to work this field. It doesn't yield very much. But if there's enough to make a pile of grain at least, then the worker has to keep farming this ground to make a pile of grain. And the Gemara says how big of a pile you need. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, Mal kitzva b'kri. Says it's not a fixed amount. It shouldn't be a fixed amount of one pile. Elim yesh bo k'dei nefila. He has to keep working if there's enough for nefila, meaning enough to plant for next year. So if a big field requires more seed to plant it next year than a small field, so if he can still yield enough grains this year, even though it's a poor harvest this year, to be able to replant the field next year and hopefully it will perform better next year, then he has to keep working. But if not, then the sharecropper is allowed to leave the field. It's circumstances beyond his control. And it's an important musar. If something is simply not working out despite your best efforts, well, consult your Rav, talk to people who might help you find a better use for your time and energy. Chazak v'ruch, tizku l'mitzvot.